This is ESPN Esports. I'm Arda. Happy to be joined by Taco, who is the brand new general manager of G2 Esports League of Legends franchise, major organization, very successful team, now with a brand new general manager. Taco, thank you for joining us all the way from Berlin, Germany.
Thanks for having me, Arda. It's my pleasure to be here.
We found out that we are both fellow Canadians growing up very close to each other, but now in different parts of the world. So it's nice to see that there's Canadians infiltrating, that Carlos is allowing some Canadians to come into the organization. This is good news.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. But in true Canadian style, I kind of want to be like the force behind the scenes that doesn't get any of the credit. That's letting everyone else take all the credit.
Which is very rare in esports. People love to take credit for their accomplishments for most of the time.
For sure. And I think a lot of people are so far very accomplished in esports and have to a certain extent the right to do so. It's a very you're in everyone's face in esports kind of thing.
So, how did this happen for you? How did you first hear of this job becoming available? How did you navigate this? What was the process like for you to end up as the GM of G2?
So I had recently completed studies in entrepreneurship and management, and I knew that the position that I was doing wasn't fulfilling me, right? And I wanted to do something where I could have more impact. And I had worked previously at Riot, so I was the producer or the live producer for the EULCS when it was called that. And so I loved esports, right? And I always knew it was something I wanted to get back into. And I kind of kept a beat on and like on the pulse of what was happening in the esports world, keeping an eye out for jobs. Um, Kind of on the side, I worked with different companies working as a player and talent manager just to make sure that that I was still present in the scene. And then eventually I saw this position open up, which was like it was the perfect position for what I wanted to do because it's both that team manager side of things, but it's also more of the business side of things where you're actually kind of working on the League of Legends product within G2 and making sure that it grows along with the competitive success of the team.
So that's interesting. Like a lot of people might just assume general manager and that deals with players and transactions, etc. Like give us a full scope of what you will be doing as the GM of G2. What different facets of work will fall on your plate?
Sure. So, I mean, you kind of touched on a really important point there is like there's a slight distinction between like a team manager and a general manager, right? So, like if you're coming from the old esports world, you have these team managers, which were essentially there to handle the day-to-day operations and logistics, making sure that players were fed, that they had their visas, that they had transportation to and from the venue, that they had their flights, like everything kind of taken care of for the players, that they knew where they had to be and what they had to do. And that's still very much part of the general manager within G2's role. But on top of that, I'm also responsible for coordinating with every single other department within G2 to make sure that we are growing our League of Legends product. And what I mean by that is like, for example, working with our content team to see if there's new content types or content styles that we want to develop or work on, or working with our business development team to see if there's an opportunity for new partnerships, right? And it's a lot of trying to figure out how to optimize the operations and the business side of League of Legends while making sure, and this is the most important thing, that the team has all the infrastructure, all the support, and everything they need to do to perform at the highest competitive level.
And I apologize. There's a new champion that was just announced in League of Legends as we record this. The name escapes me. It's gonna bug me. But anyway, like
Spirit Blossom or something. I
yeah,
couldn't. Yeah,
we apologize. People can let us know in the comments of this video
Nico with four
exactly the
legs.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
a great way to describe it. Yes. But like when that comes out, like that's a major change to the game. So like how do you digest that and what happens content wise when something major in the game itself like this happens?
Well, from a content perspective, a major change like a new champion or something doesn't super impact G2, right? We tend to not do a lot of educational formats. It's just not something that I think we've done in the past or that we plan to do. But from a competitive standpoint, typically what will happen is that you'll have a new champion will come out, but it won't be out in the competitive scene, so in the LEC, for a certain time period. And during that time period, this gives both the Riot Balance team and teams time to evaluate how does this champion play. Are they strong? Are they weak? What niches do they fill? What do they do better than others? What do they not do better than others? To see if there's ways to play around this champion. And we saw this recently with Volibear, where when Volibear was
Mhm.
reworked, teams started experimenting in different lanes, support, jungle, top, to try and see where Volibear fits. And with Nico with 4 legs, I anticipate it'll be a very similar thing.
Okay, so you talked about your other responsibilities that touch different departments. What about the players themselves? How much interaction and how much concern in your role do you have with the starting LEC players on G2?
I mean, I would say that that is my number one duty, right? So I'm in the gaming house every day. I'm with the players. I'm watching them scrim. I'm helping them set up, good habits. I work very closely with Duffman, our analyst, with Grabs, our coach, to make sure that whatever facets they don't have capacity to help the players grow on, that I'm there to help support them, right? So right now I'm looking, how can we make sure, like in Corona times, beforehand the team was doing lots of team outings, was going to the gym fairly
Mm.
regularly. Now that we're kind of locked in, how do we solve for that, right? Because maintaining healthy lifestyles is really critical to the performance of a team, and into the day-to-day performance, like how you play, like what your reaction times are. It's all very intertwined and interconnected, right? So we need to figure out how to solve for that. So I would say, to answer your question, that like taking care of the players and making sure they have everything they need is like my top priority.
How do you like G2 seems like a team that if there was one team in League of Legends that you really wouldn't tinker with the roster, other than of course Perks taking time off, deservedly so, like completely understandably so,
Yeah.
Pino coming in, for example, like there's G2 seems like a roster that is set. Like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on past success and how this team gels and the vibe of the team, every time I hear them talk, they just seem very happy with the roster that they have, right? So, as a general manager, what are the challenges that you see? Like, what are some of the things that you've, other than what you've mentioned there about, coronavirus and what every team might be dealing with, what are some of the G2 specific things that you're looking at and saying, you know what, I'd like to tweak this, I'd like to help here?
So I love what you just said, because this is one of the biggest surprises. So in my previous role at Riot, I saw and I worked with a lot of different teams, although not hands on a day-to-day basis. And one of the biggest surprises coming into G2 is just like how much camaraderie and how much affection and like gelled together the team is. Not just the players, but also the coach, the analyst, and like everybody just gets along and has a good time, right? And so the challenge that presents as a general manager is like, I don't want to come in and flip the table and turn everything upside down, because it's a recipe that already works, right? So I would be probably not doing G2 a favor if I tried to radically alter things as it stands. So a lot of what I'm doing right now is building relationships with the players and showing that I'm here for them and building that trust, and also trying to pinpoint areas where we can improve, right? And like I said, in these corona times, physical health, nutrition, kind of these out of work activities that help build that camaraderie and build that kind of secondary innate trust in people. Those are the topics that I'm really working on with the team right now, to try and figure out what is it that we can do. We can't go to movie theaters like we used to. We can't
Mm.
go to escape rooms like we used to. But that doesn't mean that we just, once the day is done, we just go our separate ways and we don't talk to each other. You have to set up these kind of activities for the team to stay connected.
One of the things that I imagine will fall on your plate is at the beginning of the season, the LEC announced this tentative plan with no timetable attached to return to studio at some point in the season. At least that was the hope, right?
Mhm.
My first question about that is, have you heard anything about when the LEC is planning to bring the players back to studio?
I haven't personally heard anything. No.
If and when that happens, let's say that, I don't know, in a couple of weeks or maybe even a month or something, players are at, or the LEC goes to teams and says, hey, prepare to come back to studio. We're going to enter phase two of our split plan.
Mhm.
What considerations and factors go into that? How much of that are you going to be involved with? for
So
G2?
again, I take over the team manager role that I described earlier in its full capacity, right? So as far as the actual schedule and logistics go, it's not super different. Typically, when we go to the studio, we have logistics that get us to the studio from the gaming house where the players live and train. And then once we're on site, typically it's coordinating between interview requests, between content requests from G2, making sure the players have everything they need, and just being kind of a runner slash gopher to make sure that everything is working as needed and that everybody has everything they need.
Is there anything are there any extra concerns? Like, I'll just use an example from other sports. There are checkpoints where there are coronavirus tests, for example, for different sports. Is there anything extra that you will have to do out of the ordinary because of the pandemic? Testing at the house before they go or anything like that? Or is it uh, all systems go as it was and things might take place at the studio itself?
So, because I haven't heard of any plans to go back to the studio, I really don't know
Okay.
what's being planned, right? I think that would be a question that would be better left for Riot, as they're generally the ones that are in charge. But whatever
Sure.
it is that they do decide to do, we'll try to, abide with to the best of our abilities and make sure that no one is at risk.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the League of Legends side of it. How much of your job will include in terms of like scouting and watching? Like, how much of your job will involve the core players in the LEC versus the substitutes and the academy players, and even watching what other teams are doing around different leagues, and possibly even scouting in solo queue? How much of that would you touch in this role?
So while I am at a high level responsible for all of these aspects, I'm not the one who's necessarily going to be doing them myself, right? So I'll be working with some of our analysts. I'll be working with maybe some external partners to try and solve whatever the problems there are. But basically, my job is to make sure that whenever we do have a need that isn't met, whether it's scouting for new talent, whether it's scouting for our opponents, is helping the team to solve and execute a plan that solves that problem. And
Mhm.
whether or not that's me doing it, I'll if that's the best course of action that we have available to us, then I will absolutely step in and do it. But given my lack of expertise in League of Legends, I'm at best gold, currently silver. Probably not the most effective use of my time.
What areas would you say you are focusing on most as you begin this journey with G2?
Really, it's a lot about getting up to speed and understanding how G2 operates. There's a lot of unique aspects to G2 that make it like a really, really fun and fast environment. And there's a lot of tribal knowledge that I kind of will need to incorporate into my day to day if I want to keep up with how G2 is doing. So that's definitely one aspect of it. The other one I would say is, again, building trust with the players, right? So that they feel that they can come to me if they have a problem. And this is something that's a little bit tricky depending on the personality of the players. As you have some players who are very, very outspoken and they have no problem telling you when you've done a terrible job and that you need to fix something. And you have other players who kind of bottle up their emotions and then they just explode when it's too late, right? And you need to figure out what is the correct approach to building that trust and building a communication where you can get that feedback before it's too late. And that's really a lot of what I'm doing right now, is trying to develop those relationships and build that trust.
In talking about relationships, let's talk about Pino in particular. One thing,
Yeah.
I had a chance to talk to him after the game on Saturday. Team went 1-1 this weekend. But one thing that he took away that he said in our interview was he felt like more a part of the G2 family after this weekend. Like, he felt more integrated. He felt the love. He loved Carlos's tweets about, we're gonna raise the trophy together, brother. Like, what kind of interactions did you have with him throughout the weekend, and what were your impressions of how he feels as a player after this weekend with G2?
I mean, I love Pinoy. I remember working with him when he was back in like Gambit days, and he would come into the studio, and so we have. Uh, I would like to think a fairly good relationship, and him coming in, he was just like he was very quiet. He didn't entirely know, like he knows all the players, right? But like it wasn't like there's this big celebration, right? And then as scrims happened, as he started to interact with the players, as he started to laugh and have fun, like they really started to gel. And it was really heartwarming to see like how accepting of Pinoy and how much time the team spent to try and get him integrated and make him feel comfortable in his new role, right? Like, he has big shoes to fill, and quite frankly, I'm really proud of how well he and the whole team did last weekend.
Yeah, he seemed to be very happy with the performance, and he was definitely put in like in a tough situation on Saturday, playing a champion. He hasn't really played in competitive. Little bit of
Mm.
a different role as opposed to having a comfort pick on Friday, but like that really stuck with me. Just the fact that he felt more part of the family, which I thought, and that's really a word that people use when describing G2. It really feels like these are five brothers that are trying to accomplish a common goal, right? Do you feel like coming into this, where do you think the source of motivation is for G2? Is it the fact that they've achieved so much success in the LEC? Is it the fact that they got so close at Worlds? Like, where would you pinpoint the source of motivation for this team creating this, like, knocking on the door of being a dynasty?
I mean, honest to goodness, I think it's all intrinsic motivation. Like, these players are some of the most motivated and hungry I have ever met. Um, which is surprising to say because, like, typically, like, none of them are rookies, right? And like typically
Mhm.
you think of like rookies, they're the hungry ones, they're coming up, they want to like dethrone everyone. But no, like the players that we have here, they're constantly pushing, they're constantly striving for their best. And well, I think, Carlos has done an excellent job of building a brand and a family that kind of allows people to be themselves, like authentically, whether it's on social media or in person, on top of the fact that they have these intrinsic motivators that really are pushing them to be the best. I think those two things combined has made G2 kind of a place where these five players can really shine.
What is the onboarding like for G2? Do you get like certain little courses you have to take? Do you get a welcome email from Carlos? Like, take us through take us through the onboarding at G2. Is there anything interesting that happens?
So onboarding at G2 is as chaotic as esports is
Is
in general, right?
is
Like,
it?
things kind of happen as they happen, and so you just got to roll with it, right? And I imagine that onboarding varies based on the role that you're in. So I mean,
Sure.
like, G2 has an office, which is where the vast majority of the G2 staff work, but I'm not in that office, right? So I'm sure if I was in that office, it would probably be a little bit easier. But basically, the onboarding is you get an introduction email. You kind of go do a tour of all the different departments. You get to meet people face to face. You get a really cool welcome package, which has lots of neat goodies in there. And it's not too dissimilar from what you would get at a normal company, which I was not expecting. I thought it was going to be a little bit more chaotic than it actually was, but it was really, really nice to get a chance to meet all the different people that I would be interacting with at least once face to face.
Sure. Last question for you. What's Carlos like as a boss? Spill it. Spill it, Taco.
Um,
Tell us everything.
So I've only had a couple of conversations with him. The ones that I've had have been very, very insightful. Like, he's really straight and to the point, which I love. And he's super, super supportive, right? Like, if you have an idea that he likes, he will 100% support you. If he doesn't like it, then he will tell you either what's wrong with it or how to fix it and support you nonetheless. And that's exactly what I would love to have in a skip lead.
I was hoping for more dirt than that, but I understand. We
Give me another
Canadians,
year, then maybe
yeah.
I'll have something more. I've literally only been here 2 weeks.
Fair enough. We Canadians also like to keep our cards tight to our chest, so we don't like to reveal information until the time is right. I understand. But when it is right, specifically anything on Carlos, I'm on the Carlos beat. So anything Carlos related, come to me first if you don't mind.
All
Let's
right,
just
I'll
make
keep that
that.
in mind.
Yeah. Taco is the new general manager of G2 Esports. Thanks for joining us here on ESPN Esports.
It was my pleasure. Have a great night, day, time.